And welcome everybody to this week's episode of Communications and Cigars. I am your host, John Crook. Welcome, thank you for tuning in. You know, it gets towards that holiday season, we've become really busy, so I'm thanking everybody that does turn in. If you're coming over from one of the other channels, that's great. Thank you for doing it. Tonight's episode, not going to hide or deny it, is recorded. Yep, unfortunately, it is recorded. And why? Because we're busy. Because I'm busy. But anyways, with that being said, I still wanted to get an episode out here, and I wanted to get this episode out in particular because tonight's episode is going to be talking about scanners versus receivers, and scanners are kind of a hot commodity item this year. I've been hearing a lot of different things about people talking about scanners and sales and everything, but we're going to dive into a little bit of a depth of a little bit of an understanding of a scanner versus a receiver, and there is a big difference. Cost difference, operational difference, those kind of things like that. So that's what tonight's episode of Communications and Cigars is going to be all about. But before we dive in there and everything like that, first of all, I want to say everybody hello. Thank you to my people who tune in on a regular basis. I do appreciate it. It is greatly appreciated. I am really happy that you do decide to tune into it. I like doing the show. It's kind of one of those deals where I was like, you know, we started a long time ago, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, about 3 years ago now. And what we were talking about is that we just kind of started to talk a little bit about, hey, this and this and this and this, and now it's kind of, I don't want to say it's going on to be more of a regular thing on a regular basis, and a lot of people are liking that. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that, the receiver part. But before we do that, if you ever have questions, comments for the show or anything like that, feel free to drop us a line, okay? And that line simply is basically our email, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. That's right, JJK Communications is a proud supporter of the channel here of Communications and Cigars, as well as they do offer a lot of great other products. We're going to actually be talking about an LTE product that is coming up here in a little while there. Maybe a couple episodes, but kind of cover a few things. But before that, that's what who our sponsor is JJK Communications. Now, before we get into that, it would not be Communications and Cigars if we did not go ahead and talk about cigars too. And one of the things I guess we'll talk on this episode here and stuff like that is the concept of a great gift giving for that cigar lover. That's right, a great gift giving for a cigar lover. And I'll tell you this, I do enjoy cigars. That's how the show started. I was out on what we call Studio P, which is the porch, and we were enjoying some cigars, talking on things, and then next thing you know is what ended up happening is just kind of blossomed into this. But one of the things I will say about it is that cigars are a very particular thing on there. And if you are not sure as to what your cigar loving person that you want to get a gift for is going to like for cigars, then let me tell you something. Go on the safer side. Find out if they do purchase cigars from any certain spots or locations on there, and then maybe get them a gift certificate from there. I will tell you, in the numerous shows that we've talked about, there's different types of cigars out there, from the different wraps to the different intensities to the different flavors to the different sizes. There's a lot that are out there, and I know some people who enjoy cigars, they like a big, fat, just basic cigar, and there's other ones like me who I enjoy the whole gambit of everything, from the little cigarros all the way up to the big toros and everything in between and all that kind of jazz on there. So find out what they're on. If not, take a look online. There's a lot of nice different places that are out there that do offer. So for example, like cigars.com. I am fortunate enough that I live near the Twin Cities and some other places that we do have some great local tobacco shops on there. And if you are looking for a place, do some research. Go there, find out if they are a smoke shop. Do they go ahead and sell cigars? And are their cigars kept in a humidor? Is whatever. Because I've come in a lot of traveling places that I've come to some places like, oh, we deal with cigars, and I find out it's a little tiny humidor where they don't really have a lot. To other places that I've walked in, that they have, it's actually within a wine store, believe it or not, and they have a huge like whole aisle locked in a with a humidor. Like they lock, like you have to call the employee over and saying, hey, can you get me in here? And then they enter the code, and then they open the door for you and stuff like that, because they want to keep it temperature controlled. But they have such a wide variety on there. So if you don't know, get the gift certificate. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier, and then you're just going to have a better luck and success on there. All right, so diving into the core of the show tonight. Not going to be too long of a show. It's going to be, once again, dealing with scanners versus receivers. Now, this has been an age-old thing on there, because people are like, well, a scanner is a receiver, right? Well, okay, sort of. But then they're like, well, then why should I go with the scanner over a receiver? Why should I go with a receiver over a scanner? And to be honest with you, that's going to come down to the ultimate aspect of what you are planning on listening to. Alrighty? So, let me go back over to my screen here. As you see, we have a couple pages up here. I've chosen Ham Radio Outlet. That's their website, hamradio.com. On there, but we're going to take a look at this main page here. So here's what you have for scanners. So what a scanner can do is that it can do multiple scanning things. And what do you mean, John? Well, just kind of what I'm getting at. Meaning is that it can do multiple modes, it can do multiple formats, and it can do multiple different ways on there. So I've had some people saying, well, isn't that a receiver does? Yes. So if you take a look at a definition of a scanner, really what a scanner is, it's a device that you can enter in multiple frequencies. Those frequencies could be of different modes, and those modes then can then be scanned or organized into banks or groups, or however the term is called in on there. And then what you could do is you can select the different things. So in essence, what I can do with a scanner is that I could take the scanner here. Let's see if they got a better picture here. Not too much better, but as you can kind of see here, it has the listing of like the zone or the bank you're in. It has the network or the system that you're monitoring. It has the additional channel on there. So those are what can be put into a scanner. All right. So think of it this way. Let's think of a normal trunked radio system. All righty. Now, a trunk radio system is a system that has multiple repeaters that are all connected into one another, right? And those multiple repeaters are trunk systems. So when the user keys up, it goes ahead, tries to find the open channel. That open channel then goes ahead, connects, and then boom, it goes out and listens to the conversation there. A scanner can be programmed to monitor those different frequencies, or sit and monitor the data coming off of a control channel, and then you can program in the defined specs of what you want to listen to. So in other words, I'm on a trunk radio system. If I want to just listen to EMS, I can program up the trunk radio system to say, hey, I want to listen to EMS. I want to listen to this talk group or this agency. And sometimes you can even get more granular and saying, I want to definitely be alerted when this ID is heard, or this ID is heard, or this kind of thing. Or maybe you might be like, hey, I just wanted to monitor everything on a system, because a trunk radio system on a system might have police, fire, EMS, public works, transportation, civil teams, all these kind of things like that on there. So with that being said, that's where the scanner has this more flexibility. In addition, just the term scanner alone means that it can loop through all these different frequencies over and over and over again. Now, the technology of scanning has really taken off. I will tell you that. Back in the days, if you've been around, like I have for many years, scanners, this is the funny part, scanners used to be crystal controlled. You used to have to get crystals for those individual frequencies that you wanted to listen to, and then you had to make sure that your scanner was capable of it. I remember one of my first scanners that I ever had 8 channels in it, that's it, and it had 8 frequencies crystals in it. So if I wanted to listen to law enforcement, I had to get that law enforcement frequency, 154860. So I put that in channel 1. And then I wanted to get the fire channel, 1543235. Boom, put that in there. and then the paging channel, and this, and this, and this. And I had to have all those crystals in there. If I didn't have the crystals, wasn't going to receive it, right? In addition, if you wanted to listen to stuff like aircraft, okay, if you want to listen like AM mode, you had to make sure that your scanner was capable of it. So now, not only did I need to go ahead and buy a crystal for the aircraft frequency I want, usually in the scanner I had to flip a switch. Now, some scanners were all the way one format across the board. You could not go ahead and do aircraft or AM versus FM or anything like that whatsoever. And then it was like, oh boy, that kind of sucks. But then scanners started to evolve where you could flip the switch and it would put it into the different kind of receiving circuitry for the modulation modes. Well, as time went on, then it started to get into more so of like VFOs, or more so a non-crystallized on there. So if I actually go back here and I take a look at it and I scroll down, like here's a good example of one. This is just a frequency controlled scanner, okay? It's not crystals or anything like that, but it's kind of a basic scanner. You kind of put your frequencies in there, you scan what you want it to do. You want it to do banks and zones and that kind of thing. So maybe I want the one bank to be my local law enforcement, and the next bank to be my local EMS and fire, and the next bank to be my public works, and the next bank, let's say I want some railroad frequencies, okay? And the next bank, let's say I want aircraft frequencies. That's how those scanners can kind of operate on there. Not saying that these can't operate in those kind of cases, but when you start to go ahead and add these kind of things on there, now what ends up happening is you start to have almost like a little computer on your hands, because now you have to do banks, you have to do zones, you have to do trunk systems, you got to do all this kind of things like that. Scanners have really evolved over the ages. In addition, now not only do you have trunk versus non-trunked and the different modes and the different digital modes, now you have scanners like this, which are SDR capable. And the SDR capable ones are basically saying, hey, I'm not using analog technology, I'm actually using an SDR type device. And that SDR type device gives you better reception and better abilities. Yeah, that's true on there. Another thing to keep in mind about scanners as we talk about this comparison is that you have to see, are they able to be programmed, or are they more of a design of a pre-programmed kind of thing? So if you're not familiar with the website, there is a website out there called radioreference.com. Now, radioreference.com is a user submission type place, a base on there. So once again, going way back in the days, if you were like me, Radio Shack, God bless Radio Shack, I really miss it. They had police call book, right? And if you open up the police call book, it had all these different frequencies of the place. So you could look up your state, you could look up your region of the state, you could look up nationwide, you could look up the county, you could look up the city you were in, and everything that was published within the FCC database went along and was put into that book, and you could buy that book, and it was great. And it was broke up to different regions of the U.S. Now, I had one that was Wisconsin, Illinois, and I remember when I was a little kid, I used to do traveling. I used to take that book with me because I had a programmable scanner. It was 50 channels. 50 channels. I was sitting in amazement there, right? And it could do all the way up to 800. That's right, 800. I could actually listen to the old Fleet Call, which was previous Nextel. We've talked about that before. But anyways, I could listen to those trunk radio channels. It was so great, right? But then I'd go down to like relatives in Chicago, where I'd travel the state, and I'd take the little book, and I'd have that always with me and everything like that on there. Well, now people do the submission through Radio Reference. Not all it's always correct and everything, but now what you do is you have scanners that are sort of like this, which are pre-programmed. So the database is actually pulled out of Radio Reference, and when that database is pulled out of Radio Reference, then all you simply do is you can program in your zip code, or you can program in your state, and then you can program in the type of radio services. Now, for me personally, John, I don't like this. The reason I don't like this is because I want something that I can program and change in my scanner. I want to be able to select what I want to program, what I don't want to program, what I want to do the names, because they go by sometimes classifications of the radio service, and sometimes what people put in as the quote-unquote radio service is not the correct radio service, and that just annoys me and angers me, because it's like, no, they may put everything into this one jumbo of a category, and it's like, well, no, I don't want to do that. So I like to be able to program my scanners on my own. I'll use Radio Reference as a database, but also too is I actually like to go to the FCC website, and I actually like to take and look for frequencies myself, as compared to relying on someone else to put it in there. Because if someone puts the wrong frequency in there or they list it as the wrong purpose, then that kind of sucks on there, right? Alrighty, so that is what when we talk about a scanner. Okay, once again, multiple frequencies, different types of systems. So conventional versus trunking versus the multiple different types of trunking on there, whether it be LTR or P25 or Open Sky or whatever might be out there, EDAX, those kind of things like that. Okay, that is what a scanner does. Now we're going to talk about receivers. Now receivers are different. Okay, and the reason receivers are different is they're designed to receive on a certain frequency. They may have memories in that receiver, so you can instantly sort of go back to it, but in essence, it isn't really going to be one that is designed to, hey, I want to program in these 10 frequencies and I want to scan these 10 frequencies. In addition, some of the receivers will not be able to do networks for monitoring. So in other words, it may not be able to decode or do trunking on trunk networks. Alrighty, that means like if you program in, let's say, a trunk radio system and the site has 5 channels, once again, trunk radio, key up, finds the best tower site, boom, spits it out. Well, these receivers may not be able to do that, okay? So you're not going to be able to trunk a system correctly. Now, some of these, once again, here, like we'll talk about this one here. This one receiver does all these different modes that are on there, okay? So it does Moto Turbo, it does DMR, which Moto Turbo and DMR are pretty much the same thing. P25, DPMR, NextDen, D-Star, the little cheap Chinese digital format, System Fusion, Alinko, all those kind of things like that on there. Those can receive it. So if you're parked on a frequency and that receiver is receiving something on there, it may be able to decode these modes. But it is not going to be able to be programmed for a trunked network on there. So that's the difference between receivers and scanners. Now, one other thing that we'll go ahead and talk about on here is that when you come into receivers and scanners, you kind of have devices which are somewhat of a hybrid. Okay. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute. How do you mean hybrid? Isn't a scanner a receiver? Yeah, that's correct. But what you have is, and I use this here because a lot of people like to do this one. This is called the Communications series. Now I have the G4, G5 up and running, but they have multiple ones here. I like the G2, G3 models myself. Okay, I like the G3 because it's a dual band, and then once again, this is now a receiver and kind of scanner all in one, because not only does it act as a pager, you can monitor P25 conventional, and you can monitor P25 phase 1 and phase 2 trunking. So not only is it a receiver, hey, I'm sitting on one frequency, I'm listening to it, you can set it up and program it that it allows to do some scanning on there, or you could set it up to do some trunking, but your limitations might get a little too much. And here's what I mean. If we go back to the scanner here, right? The scanner, you could put multiple things in like a zone, right? You can put different systems in a zone. You can put there, those kind of things, however you want to do it, certain frequencies. Like for mine, I like to listen to some DMR stuff, some NextDen stuff, all that kind of jazz. I could put it in there, and I could put the one frequency 1 and bank 1, channel 1. I could do as a DMR. Next one I could do P25. Next I could do NextDen, then DexDen, and then P25, and conventional. Right? You can do those things that are mixed up on there. Receiver, once again, nope, it's one frequency, the one mode that's on. But then when you get to these kind of devices, which are sort of like I said, I almost kind of want to put them in their own kind of classification, where they're a receiver. They're designed to sit on one frequency and do a specific function, i.e. act as a pager. But then you can scan conventional stuff, but then you could set up a zone to do trunking. So you kind of have it spaced out as in like, well, this zone does this. This zone can do this with limited functionality, but then this does this. So that's kind of where that hybrid aspect of things kind of come into play on there. So that's kind of what we, kind of covering that concept of, scanner, receiver, or kind of sort of like a hybrid. Now, the reason I get asked this a lot is because I've had people that say, John, what can I do? What what's a good gift to get someone? Like, hey, my dad wants to listen to the local law enforcement, or my mom, she used to have a scanner way back in the day, and she's like, I just want to listen to the local places. I've had people and friends that say, hey, I want to just listen to some of the ham stuff. Others, I just like the railroad stuff. So it's all going to be dependent upon what you want to go ahead and do and what you want to listen to. I'm going to tell you this. Get the scanner that fits your needs. If you're not going to listen to trunk radio networks, if you're not going to listen to aircraft stuff, if you're not going to listen to all these other different things in there, then by all means, don't waste your money buying a device like that. Really don't. As you see, scanner prices can be really, really huge and up there, right? Because if you wanted to buy these options, wanted to buy these features on there and stuff like that, if you wanted to be able to receive everything underneath the sun, yeah, then by all means, you're going to have to spend $500, $600, $700 on there. If you want a basic scanner that is just going to basically receive the weather frequencies, maybe your local fire and EMS paging channel. Most fire and EMS, they usually tend to be more analog, where public, like law enforcement, police services that's starting to get into digital. But that's where you kind of mix and match in the whole thing, right? That's where you kind of say, okay, yeah, no, I just need a basic one, because there are basic scanners that don't do elaborate trunking or different modes or stuff like that on there. It really is going to come down to what you want to listen to. If you are a scanner buff, if you are someone that says, hey, I might want to do this, if you think you're going to be all over the board, then you know what? Go big right away. As I say, go big or go home. Or say, hey, about this, go big and then bring it home, because then that's going to help you mitigate things. That's going to help you figure out what you want to do, how you want to do it, those kind of things like that on there. If you feel that you're never going to do it, once again, I know a guy, he does rail monitoring. That's all he does. He likes to listen to the railroads. He lives near a nice big railroad yard, and he does that. For him, actually, he's a ham too, and lives down there in the Chicago South Suburbs area. He goes along, and guess what he does? He uses his amateur radio, because they're analog, and it's a wide receiver. So he's like, why buy a scanner? Why buy another scanner and stuff like that? I have this on here, and boom, it's good to go. And that's the other thing. If you are in, or you have licenses for multiple services, okay, so if you have a GMRS license, or you use a MERS radio, or you have a marine radio, or something like that, you would be surprised at how some of these radios out there are multifaceted. So if you're an amateur radio operator and you're not going to be listening to like P25 or NextDen or DMR or something like that, and you have just a basic amateur handheld analog, you'd be surprised what that could pick up. That could pick up marine, that could pick up railroad, that could pick up some aircraft stuff depending on the coverage on there, and it really does a lot for you. However, if you're going to be, once again, that person that I want to listen to the digital trunk radio systems and this and this and this and this, then by all means, go ahead, take a look at your scanner on there. If you want a full coverage device, that's when you're probably going to have to step up to the receiver. That's usually where receivers kind of shine. And I'll tell you why here. Let's go ahead, and we're going to go back to our screen here real quick. Let's take a look at it. So in this case here, I'm going to pull up the specs here. This is going to cover 25 megahertz through 1.3 gigahertz. Okay? So it's going to get you, like, amateur-wise, 10 meters. It's going to get you the CB band is the low end. And then the upper band is going to get you the upper amateur band. It might get you some other things like that on there. But those are in essence the frequency ranges. Now you look there, yes, there's a little gap between the 5 to 700 and then some of the 800. That's because of the cellular stuff on there. But now let's go look at the receiver here. Now let's look at this receiver. That's 100 kilohertz to 1300 megahertz, or 100 kilohertz to 1.3 gigahertz. Okay? We're talking like AM broadcast band all the way up to the 1.3 gigahertz. So you're going to get a lot you're going to get more range, okay? And then, in addition in there, you're going to be able to see and copy more. You're going to be able to see and cover more of that band. Like, if you want to listen to HF frequencies, or you want to listen to shortwave, then you're going to probably need a receiver. Alrighty. If you want to just, once again, listen to the local law enforcement on there, that's in VHF, UHF, or 800, then a scanner might suffice on there. So that's kind of the biggest things between a scanner and receiver. just to give you some ideas, if you're looking at buying gifts, because like I said, I know a lot of them are on sale. I've had a few people that told me, hey, can you help me? Can you give me an episode on programming? Well, we might a little bit later on there. But before that, I think it's time for tonight's episode part where we always like it. You know what really bends my antenna? You know what really bends my antenna? Is people that don't want to buy a scanner, they don't want to buy a receiver, but they want to buy a radio and try to use it as a scanner or a receiver. Folks, you're asking for a world of hurt and you're asking for your checkbook to start bleeding, okay? You have to understand, one of the reasons people went to trunking is because they needed more frequency, diversity, flexibility, okay? Okay, I should say diversity, but versatility, right? So before, once again, looking at trunking, you went along and it has multiple repeaters on there, the groups of people talk together. Back in the day, security was on one frequency for a mall, let's say. Housekeeping was another, and maintenance was on another. Well, guess what happened? If maintenance was busy, but they needed to get a hold of someone else on another maintenance channel or something like that, they couldn't, because they couldn't use housekeeping, they couldn't go ahead and use the security frequency, so they had to wait until it was clear and blah, 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 blah. Trunking went along and tied those together. So now, hey, guess what? Maintenance has two talk groups. So if talk group 1 is being used, someone could click over. Hey, Bob, can you come meet me over here by the east entrance here? I got a problem with the door. Okay, cool. Great. That's how trunking works. But one of the things that trunking quickly leveraged was based on the technology, you could lock down a system. And when I say lock down a system, I mean lock down a system. So that if you did not have the correct programming for the radio, if you did not have a quote-unquote system key, then you could not program your radio to be able to transmit on the system. With conventional systems, unless you're using encryption, you really got to know the frequency. If it's a repeater, you got to know the transmit and receive frequency. You got to know the tones. You got to know if it's digital, analog, those kind of things. But if it doesn't have encryption on there, pretty much you can almost get it hacked. But trunking adds that layer of complexity on there. As we move to greater and higher tiers of trunking systems, it's increased security, it's increased there. You can add encryption, and you can even steer. Some systems have the ability for you to steer the talk groups on there. Like, hey, this talk group can only be on, let's say, 1 or 2 of the 5 different trunk channels on there. Okay? You can have preemptive priority, all those kind of things. But why am I saying this? Is because when you take a radio and you try to program it, it's not going to work unless you have the system key, okay? And if you have the system key somehow, you are being given, and you got it legitimately, let's put it that way, you got it legitimately, you are being given a giant task and responsibility to not screw things up, okay? You are not. Because that's your key to be able to program and put a radio on the system. Now, I'm not going to get into the governmental organizations and regulations of systems, and each system is different. I run my systems different than, let's say, the state of Wisconsin does versus what a local system would do. Everybody has their own views on it. When it's your system, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? But when you take a radio and you try programming it for that, you're really kind of going down a rabbit's hole. And you're going to have problems. And the radio may not allow you in any way, shape, or form to program that without it. And if you did not get the system key legitimately, now, technically, you could be committing a crime. And when you screw around with radio systems, especially if public safety is involved, you're talking felony crimes. Alrighty? That's why I tell people, if you're going to go ahead and you're going to be using a radio, make sure it's something for your frequencies, your authorization. Don't feel you need to go ahead and do it. Program it correctly, get it on the right frequencies. But don't use a radio for scanning on a system. Really don't. Now, once again, let me clarify. If you have a right to do it. So, for example, if it's an amateur radio, make sure it's not modified. I know people out there feel the need to modify a radio and the whole, I can use it whenever there's emergency. Bullshit, guys. Sorry, to tell you the truth, that's what it is. Okay, you're going to get in a crap load of trouble, even if it is an emergency. But for an example, if I take my public safety radio here, okay, and I program it for someone else's frequencies that I don't have authorization to, why? Why am I doing that? To listen? Okay, if my department has a need to listen, I will go with you on that concept. If my department has no reason, if I'm programming in the law enforcement digital channel for a county I'm not even in, that my department doesn't mutual aid, I am asking for a world of hurt. I've been on the side of, what the hell are you doing? Been pulled over, okay? Been pulled over because, guess what? I was talking on a Motorola radio, Spectra, way back in the day, okay? Loved my Spectra. I was talking on it, talking on amateur, talking on simplex, running a good old 100 watts. That's why I had it. Well, I happened to pass a state patrol officer in Minnesota. That's before they were all trunked. And guess what? I bled over onto one of his frequencies. So what does Captain Superpants over there go ahead and see? Well, he goes ahead, immediately pulls behind me and pulls me over. And he says, what is that radio for? What are you going ahead? Why are you using it? You're coming over my radio. I said, I'm not coming over on your radio. And I said, I'm talking on amateur radio and da-da-da-da-da. Well, this was an uneducated trooper, okay? But what it was is I was actually coming over. He pulled me over, and it probably would not have been an issue if he would have saw it was amateur radio. But no, what does he see? He sees a Motorola Spectra, which, guess what, is the same radio he had in his car. So why would he not think that I am going ahead and using my radio for illegal purposes, because it's the same radio he has and it was coming over his radio, okay? That's what I'm saying, is don't do that. In addition, this is where, to be honest with you people are starting to go ahead and turn on encryption and starting to go ahead and make systems more secure because they don't want the listeners on there. They don't want someone to go on eBay to buy a public safety radio or a commercial radio, program it with public safety frequencies, and then we hear the stories about someone interfering with California wildfire and then getting on and doing all these kind of things. We've heard all these stories before, right? We have. Okay? But that's what's going ahead and driving it. I know of two systems, and I'm not going to say the names, I'm not going to say where they're at, but I travel a large area of the United States. I know of two systems that I have friends that work with these systems, and they said it is truly, legitimately because of people buying used commercial radios, buying Motorola's, Kenwoods, E.F. Johnson's, Harris, all those kind of things like that, and then trying to program them onto the system and do all those things, that one, personal radios are not being allowed on systems, and two, they're looking at doing harder encryption or changing things on their system so that people can't just put radios on the systems. So, in closing, make sure you're not going ahead and just buying a radio to be cool, to be that whacker mentality. Actually, buy a radio that has a purpose. Alrighty? Get a license for it. If you have a radio that does UHF, then get a UHF business license, VHF business license, amateur stuff. That's fine. But only program and have the ability to use the frequencies that you do. That's going to save you a lot in the long run. It really is. Well, folks, that's this week's episode of Communications and Cigars with the scanner and the receiver thing. Like I said, it's a big thing. When I was young, getting into it, I kind of didn't have it on there. Receivers weren't in the context that they are today. I do remember having an old realistic receiver that was HF, and it was pretty cool to listen to and everything like that on there. But receivers have come a long way in technology, and so have scanners. And I'll tell you, sit back and enjoy them. They're fun, but use them right, use them responsibly, and you'll have more fun. So I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. I know we got a few weeks left until Christmas. We're still going to have a few more shows coming in for the remainder of this year, but we look forward to having bigger and better shows after the new year. So until then, stay safe, take care. If you got them, go ahead and enjoy them. Until then, everybody.